Welcome to the Berkowitz, Hanna, Amdur, and Wildstein Love of the Law podcast. Today I'm joined by Russ Berkowitz, managing partner of Berkowitz, Hanna, Amdur, and Wildstein. We're talking about how AI is changing the way plaintiff personal injury and medical malpractice cases are handled, from intake and research to discovery and drafting. Russ also explains why, even with today's technology, sound legal judgment still matters more than ever. All right, I'm here with Russ Berkowitz, episode 11. Russ, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Monty. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for giving me the reins on this episode. You've been doing a great job hosting the series. But let's jump into my very next question. So, broadly speaking, how have AI platforms evolved for plaintiff personal injury and medical malpractice workflows over the past 12 to 18 months?
Well, I think when you and I had another podcast 4 or 5 months ago on this subject on AI and personal injury medical malpractice cases, I think that the evolution, as I said at that time, we were in the early stages or the beta stages of AI in our specific field. And I think that while we are still in the earlier phases in some ways, even in those 4 or 5 months since the time that we had our chat at the last podcast, things have improved dramatically in some ways and made our jobs much easier, especially on the medical malpractice side. The PI side, I think that the software for the platform that we use, I think it was more advanced at that time for personal injury, but for what we specifically do on our end of the office, I think that we were not nearly as ahead as they are. And I can see the differences in certain areas of the work that we do, that it's become a very, very valuable tool in terms of efficiency, accuracy, and just, making the team's job easier in certain respects.
Now, what specific legal workflows are now being automated with machine intelligence that historically required the most manual lawyer or paralegal hours?
Well, I think that there's three different components to what a firm like ours will use AI for. First, you have your litigation support AI work, which I'll talk mostly about today. You have your legal research aspect of AI, and you have your medical research, which is an important component of what we do as medical malpractice attorneys. And I think, looking first at the legal research component, we've always had legal research software. We use a company called LexisNexis. Another company that other firms use, in addition to LexisNexis, is something called Westlaw. Both are very similar in nature, and they assist the lawyers of today in researching cases and getting outcomes, cases that apply to the issues at hand in a much faster way than back in the day when I was in law school, where we didn't have any of these materials. We had to do what we call shepherd. You would shepherd the cases, meaning they had a book. It would actually have a book of all the cases that might be applicable to your issue at hand, and you had to manually find these cases instead of just typing in the subject matter that you're researching on LexisNexis and the issue at hand, and it comes right up on your computer. And so we've had that a long time. The difference, the improvement to some extent is the added component of AI to the legal software program that we did have. And I think that AI helps them do more. For instance, it can help you write a motion. It can help you do a number of other things as side issues along with filing the motion. The problem is, and it's still a problem, which we don't have in this office because my staff is in tune with what works and what doesn't work. Is I think we mentioned this on our first episode regarding AI. There's a hallucination, issue that pops up. So while there is that issue doesn't come up if you just research flat out on LexisNexis, when you click on the AI component and you prompt it, it will actually come up with, for instance, let's say you want a motion and AI does the motion for you. What AI does is it'll create a motion, but it sometimes plagiarizes the court cases without citing the cases. So, for instance, an introduction to a motion, when they're writing something, it looks great, but they don't tell you that they're basically plagiarizing the cases that we're drawing the information from, and they don't cite it. So if you run with that in court, and the court sees that, and they're familiar with that specific case, they're probably going to ask you why you didn't cite it. Why are you using it as your own product? So I think that in addition to citing cases that don't exist, the hallucination issue are things that you have to really pay attention to still. So 4 or 5 months, it still hasn't made a difference in that respect. And I think what it's done though is it's made attorneys aware that you have to do your due diligence. You have to do your checking, because what has continued to happen is there are courts all over the country who will actually fine lawyers if they have a case that's not really a case. And I say fine, they fine them up to 10, 15, $20,000 for doing that. They want to make a lesson out of the people that are doing this. So lawyers do not do that. I mean, lawyers continue, I don't know why, but they continue to use ChatGPT to write a brief. ChatGPT is great in some respects, but not with that. So why would you want to use ChatGPT when they constantly have fake, cases in there, or they misstate what the law is, and it's not a workable formula for a firm that wants to be successful. And if anything, you're exposing your firm and your client with a judge who is going to slam you, and that could turn the result of the case. And so the legal research that we do that has that AI component, the LexisNexis with the AI component, we're still careful because the legal research aspect is always right. There's no hallucination. They're citing all the cases that need to be cited. There's no fake cases that are in there. But on the added component of the AI, and you're prompting AI to please write the introduction to this motion, it may be fake, maybe hallucinated. And so I think that certain lawyers are developing a reputation of not being trusted, nor their work product. And I think that you just have to be careful. The other AI that I mentioned, which is the medical research, which is really important to the med mal side of the firm, because a lot of times, as soon as the client comes in, we want to do some quick research on the issue that they're saying that either their loved one died from, condition, or birth injury case. We do a prompt or an email. We do a word search on. We use a company called Open Evidence. Even the doctors use Open Evidence now. Open Evidence, in my opinion, is even better, and they capture articles from all over the world and cite all the medical literature they use, are right on point with what the standards of care on out there. And in seconds, you get the information that you want versus, either ourselves or having an associate do research that could take 5, 6, 7, 8 hours on a topic, getting it done in 30 seconds. It's incredible. So that area has been fabulous for us because it's a huge time saver. I mean, we do have a nurse on staff and a nurse off staff that we utilize in other respects. But as far as the research now, it's so helpful for us because after we get the information from the prospective client and we have the research in front of us, can then, when we get the medical records and we talk with experts, we have a little extra knowledge now of what we think the expert's going to say because we actually have these standards out there already intertwined into our theory of the case, so to speak, so we can talk intelligently to the doctors and be on a better understanding of what the issues are. And then lastly, the discovery aspect of cases, which is sort of our bread and butter that we really use AI for. We have a different company that we use for that, a different AI platform. There's a lot of good aspects to that. I'm a huge proponent of this company's discovery part of the platform.
I do remember that being kind of the main topic from that previous episode that we did about AI too, kind of that balance, where it's a very easy tool that saves a lot of time, but then obviously, you need to be mindful, being due diligent when it comes to the work and making sure you are covering your bases and making sure that the end product is correct, is right, which is really, really important.
I think 4 or 5 months later, I think that with our complaining to our company about that we use, they're called Supio, and they're a leader in the personal injury industry. They weren't really there is no leader in the medical malpractice industry, but I do think that a light bulb went off in the founder's head like, "Hey, if we can get this medical malpractice part up to speed with the PI part, capture more a new market out there of attorneys." So when we got involved with this whole process, We were really getting it for the PI team. And they were trying to sell us on the idea that's going to assist us with med mal cases. And there were some things that were helpful for us. But as you mentioned, we were having a difficult time believing everything that we were seeing, and it involved a lot of due diligence on our part. However, since then, and frankly, part of it was our ignorance in the platform itself. So there are so many things that we do now that may have existed 4 or 5 months ago, but we didn't know they existed. So I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say there's a defendant doctor deposition coming up, and you can just basically create a prompt that says, please prepare 200 questions for the defendant doctor. And you mention the doctor's name. And Supio will come up with 200 questions in less than 3 minutes. And then when you look at the questions, if you think they didn't focus specifically on some of the target areas we wanted to focus on, we may say to them, please ask another 50 questions specifically as it relates to, hypothetically, March 25th. Or please list out all the lab studies for the entire admission in chronological order, and they'll have that all listed out for you. Or please list out every day Dr. X saw the patient and tell us exactly what his care and treatment involved. And so you're creating this large scale question answer thing that would take days to prepare if you were getting ready for a deposition that was important, where in 5 to 10 minutes, you're getting it all. So that's just one item. And there's many other prompts that we use for different aspects. But that's one thing that when we met with you, Jen and I, 4 or 5 months ago, we weren't aware that Supio could do that. And I'm not sure it even existed. I think they started gearing up on the med mal side and how they're creating content for us. And one of the things I did find is that the Supio brain, it used to be that, I know that Janet said the last session, that it's a closed platform, which means the only information that they use is information that we've uploaded that are within our file. And that is true to some extent, unless you, for instance, go outside the scope of your file and you want to have medical literature or legal research and you want to upload that too. And Supio has that. But even without doing that, the Supio brain actually was able to have critical thinking to the extent that they could figure out what the issues of the case were. Like, for instance, I'll do a prompt that says, please provide me with the pros and cons of this case. I don't even have to mention anything further. And they'll give you a laundry list of all the strengths and weaknesses of the case. Now, I'll look at it and I may say, there's some other things that are issues, but I mean, I find it amazing that in a matter of minutes, they're spitting out these strengths and weaknesses of your case. And I think it's amazing. It's a time saver. But with the caveat that there are things you have to add sometimes, right? I mentioned the questions that they spit out all those questions. There may be questions that I specifically want to ask that aren't in there. So I have to, create those on my own. But what a time saver it is to not have to go home after you had a deposition, let's say on Monday, and you've got another one on Tuesday, and you have Supio that you can draft the questions for you, and you kind of review them, and you fill in the gaps with things that you think are important instead of being up till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, getting ready for the next day or the day after. And I think that those are intangible things that make all the difference in being fresh for the next session, so to speak.
Now, this next question I'm excited about. We talked about it a few months ago, but now I want to see where we're at today. What advances have been made in AI for drafting pleadings, complaints, answers, motions, which you mentioned earlier in this interview, and other practical legal documents?
From the personal injury side, my understanding is that they utilize it to do complaints. They use them for demand letters where, when a case is ready to settle, you send a package off to the insurance company. And instead of them preparing the demand letter from scratch, AI will do that for them, and you can just edit that if it needs to be edited, maybe put it in and change some of the language so it sounds like it's more in your words than the computer's words. And I think that, as I said, because it was originally a personal injury program, I think that they can do pretty much everything with it. With us, what I have found is we have to provide Supio, and I think any other company that does this, with a like kind template so that they can see what the format is that we like to use. And I still have had mixed reviews with that. For instance, we recently did a mediation statement for a large, wrongful death case on on the medical malpractice side. And we gave them two different templates so that it was formatted the way that we hoped that they would have liked it. And you upload every document in the file so that they have a lot to work with. And it was great, honestly. It needed very little work other than adding, we have our own style on how we do a mediation statement. We have pictures and we cite, it's a medical device case, medical device involved, and family photos or family of the loved one. There's medical literature that's cited in there and it was great. I did another one not too long ago and it was terrible. And I told the company it was terrible because it was a unique case with a unique fact pattern, and we couldn't find a formatted template that Supio could grab onto in a like kind manner and create a similar sort of flow. I mean, we were talking about apples and oranges. It was a case of the care going wrong before the labor and delivery of a baby. Supio grabbed onto all the information, and they were talking about in the mediation statement the failure to timely deliver the baby. So they made it into a labor and delivery case. Obviously, that went into the garbage, and we didn't use it. We just deleted it. And that was the end of that. We did that one from scratch. So I think that we're still a work in progress with it. In a perfect world, it'll get to the point I would think in the next year where the one that I'm not happy with will probably be much better, and why that's important. Again, it goes to the issue of speed and efficiency. The one that we did like, we asked for a verified mediation statement, and I think in 4 hours we had sent back to us almost a perfect product, give or take, making maybe 30, 45 minutes of changes. That mediation statement normally would have, before AI, would have taken either an associate or myself or one of my other partners, probably would have taken, a couple of days to do. To basically just upload a bunch of documents that they already have in their platform and to just click on a link that says verified mediation statement. And 4 hours later, you're getting a signal that it's done. I mean, how good is that? But the product has to be good. We're not the kind of firm where we're just going to take some sort of half-baked product and float it out there to the other side because it doesn't bode well for when you're asking for the kind of money we ask on these cases. The product has to be matched up with the expectations that we have for the case. There's certain things, as I said, in discovery, even for trials, it's good. You give them enough information, you tell them what jurisdiction you're in, they'll actually come up with a profile of the juror that you want on your jury. Whether that's accurate or not, I don't know, but they actually have done that. So I think that the sky's the limit on what can be done. I just think that most of us that do this have to recognize its limitations and be patient that it will get better. No different than what we talked about at the last session several months ago, where when computers first came out, you think about where they were when they first came out, how it took 45 minutes to an hour for the internet to load, and nobody was thinking this was ever going to be how was this going to be better? And then, fast forward, it's everybody's go-to, right? I mean, and it didn't take that long. So I think that this is what's happening with the AI platforms in the personal injury medical malpractice field. We are in the beta stage still, but on the other hand, we're definitely further along in the last 4 or 5 months than we were before we chatted back then.
Now, what's coming next for AI in plaintiff personal injury and medical malpractice law, both near term, so let's say the next 12 months, and then how about the longer term also?
It's difficult to tell what's coming next because we're not the ones that make the determination about what comes next. What I would hope would come next is that every aspect of what we do actually can be replicated by the AI platforms that we use so that we're doing less and less editing, less and less worry about hallucination, products that come out. So I think it's really more about perfecting things. I think we're at the point now where we know what AI can do for us. We just want to make sure that what they do for us is of a similar quality, but faster version of what we already were doing before AI.
Russ Berkowitz of Berkowitz, Hanna, Amdur, and Wildstein, thank you for being on this episode of Love of the Law podcast.
My pleasure, Monty. Always good seeing you.